Hi, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Mini Clinics with Mitch. My name, of course, is Mitch Braley. I'm a member of Racquetball Canada's National Development Team, coming to you from my basement on behalf of Racquetball Canada. Today, we're going to be talking about a incredibly effective tool you can use to help improve your game. I call it, to refer to it as reviewing the tape. So taking video of yourself, whether it's in practice sessions or in games or matches, and then being able to study it and review it afterwards for the sole purpose of improving. Now, a person could talk for hours about how to do this for racquetball or for any sport, and in some sports, there's people that are paid a lot of money to be video coaches strictly and analyze game footage and go over it with the athletes. So I certainly don't claim to be an expert myself. It's only something that I've started doing in the past couple of years as I start to realize and appreciate the benefit that it brings. But I'll give you some brief ideas as to how you can start doing it for your own game. Hopefully, you have some footage of yourself playing from before COVID shut everything down. But if not, I'll talk a little bit about how you can look at some pro matches online, and there's plenty of those, and still pick away at them, study them, and use it to improve your game when we get back to the courts. So, why is it important to review tape in the first place? Well, outside of some of the top players in the world and top pros, most people really don't have an accurate idea of what's really going on with their game on the court. And by that, I mean there's a disconnect between what you think your swing looks like and what your footwork's like and your serves, or even something like how much time you have to get to the ball once your opponent's hit it versus what's actually going on. So the picture you have in your head doesn't match what's actually happening on the court. And film is the only way to look back and realize what is happening. A couple of things, you can film your practice sessions, which is great for more technical things, especially with phones that have slow-mo capability. I think a lot do nowadays, and that's great for breaking down your swing mechanics, your serving mechanics, some of your footwork, some various drills. And if you don't have the ability or the knowledge to do that yourself, now you have actual footage or files that you can bring to a coach or a more veteran player that can look at it versus needing them um, on the court with you during the practice session live. And more so in games, you can also look at some technical things where your swing might break down your footwork, how you approach the ball, but it's also really good for strategy. So you can see where you're missing setups or struggling from different parts of the court. And you can also look at it for your opponent too. If you have particular opponents that you have footage on, you can look and see where are they we get returning certain serves or certain shots. So it's awesome from all sorts of different aspects and angles. And the nice thing about film is it doesn't lie. So when you're watching it, that is exactly how things are happening. There's no way around it. So even if you think you have a picture perfect swing or perfect footwork, you're going to realize really quickly that there's probably a lot of areas that you can improve on. The nice thing is there's no rush. You can take the time to rewind 100 times to break down different things, look at different aspects, and you can get a ton of benefit out of even having just a few short minutes of video. But I cannot stress enough that the film isn't going to lie, and it's incredibly beneficial to be doing this even once a week during your practice sessions. Maybe not every time, but absolutely be doing it regularly.
For anybody concerned about continuity, my headset died while trying to shoot this video, so I'm relegated to using my earphones. But more importantly, four types of video that there are to study as far as I'm concerned. Number one is going to be your own practice sessions, which is straightforward enough. Number two is going to be your games, focusing on yourself and what you're doing. Number three is going to be your matches, your games, but focusing on what your opponent is doing. And a similar category doesn't necessarily have to be against you, but if there are opponents that you're wanting to beat or compete against often, if you have some footage of them playing other players, then watching them and focusing on what they're doing as well would count under this. And lastly is pro matches. So if you don't have any footage of yourself or opponents, there's dozens of videos online from different camera angles. The quality is great, and you can learn from the best in the world. Look at their footwork, their racket prep, their swing, all of the above, and so much more. And it's a terrific way to find things that you can start implementing and visualizing into your own game. A really important note before we get going with this is watching racquetball to be entertained and for fun is a completely different process than watching it to study and to learn. So what we're going to be doing is an active process. You're going to want a pen and paper handy, even an Excel spreadsheet. We'll look at what that looks like shortly, but it can be a very exhausting and tiring process. You're looking at a lot of data and breaking a lot of things down and trying to track a lot. So just be aware that it's very different than just sitting down to even zone out at times and be kind of floating in and out with your attention span. You need to be watching each rally, know what you're looking for, and do that for the course of an entire practice session or an entire game. So filming your practice sessions, like I touched on earlier, you're rarely going to have a qualified coach with you at every single one of your practice sessions. If you do, awesome. Still think taking videos is a great idea. But being able to do this allows you to take some footage and bring it to a coach to study and go over them with it. So they can be more flexible with you and you can work out ways to go over the video together and break down some areas that you're concerned about or want to look at closer. And you don't have to film the entire session. Of course, that's an option if you want to do it. But even if you're working on particular areas of your game, so maybe you're looking at a stroke for a couple of weeks or for a session, then take the video of that. So you can do 5 minutes of stroke and 5 minutes of your footwork and just break it down into pieces, keep it organized, and then you can look back yourself afterwards. But court time can be limited with busy schedules. So this is absolutely one of the best ways to maximize the benefit you're going to get out of all the time you're spending on the court. So what do we want to film? Of course, if you're filming the entire practice session, then you're going to be capturing everything anyways. But if you're just looking to capture specific pieces, I think the main areas here are going to be your swing, and you're going to want to film from different angles. You're going to want to film facing your front, facing behind you from either side. So you're hitting into the camera and then having the camera behind you where the back wall would be as you're hitting towards the front wall. So getting a bunch of different angles and perspectives, super important. Use a slow motion option if you have it on your phone. That's really useful as well. And you can just break down every single frame. Same thing with the serve. Um, more so for the drive serve because there's a lot more moving pieces, but you want to film different angles. You want to make note not just of what your mechanics are, but where is the ball contacting the front wall in relation to where it's ending up in the backcourt. Is it going where you want it to, and where do you need to adjust? And like I said before, how people don't necessarily have an accurate idea of what's actually happening. I think you'd be surprised to realize, well, hey, my target was at point X on the front wall, but I'm actually hitting point Y all the time. Or, hey, when I hit this spot on the front wall, the ball ends up where I want it to go, even though I was aiming at a completely different spot. So you can really start to study the angles and realize where the ball is going based on how you're hitting it. Footwork is another obvious one, whether it's some star drills, some mini star drills, or some different feeds you're doing, but making sure you're getting an angle where you can watch your feet and see what they're doing. And then what I like to do is I'll film myself doing something like a star drill, for instance, do it one time, stop, take a look, make sure that I'm doing it properly, because there's really no point in continuing to do it if my footwork's improper. And I can have a decent idea just from the movement or doing the drill, but I won't know until I've looked at the footage live during my practice session. Say, hey, you know what, I can improve this part of it. I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to fix this. So you can almost correct yourself in real time, which is incredibly powerful. And then various drills. So there's dozens of drills, of course, out there, different feeds and fancy, funky things you can do, which is awesome. So if there's some that you're struggling with, that'll probably be your first area of focus. So film it and identify the areas that are causing you trouble. Or is it your spacing from the ball, maybe your footwork, maybe your swing, maybe you're just hitting the ball to the wrong spot. And then, of course, film the drills that you think you're strong in or do well in, because I think you're going to pick up on some things that you can still continue to improve on. Now, unfortunately, without access to courts, I can't really demonstrate a lot of things I would film for my own practice session to give a better visual picture, but hopefully that at least gives you somewhat of an idea of things you can do. Maybe you already have some footage of your own practices, or you can try it out next time you're able to get onto the court. But next up, we're going to talk about your games. So the easiest thing to track, in my opinion, is going to be your return of serve. or your opponent's return to serve, you can do this for either of them. But as you can see here, I made a really basic table in Microsoft Excel. I'd basically be charting these down in a notepad and then bring it over to Excel later, just because it's a really good way to look at all the numbers and see what's going on here. And of course, I only have 4 serves, just drive left, drive right, lob right. You can have a whole bunch on here. You can incorporate Z's and wraps and everything else, but just for simplicity and demonstration's sake. So I have, if we're talking about me and I'm watching footage and looking at my return to serves, so these would be the serves that my opponent is hitting to me, and then these are going to be the returns I'm hitting. So based on what the serve was I hitting either a kill or a good solid offensive shot, like a really good quality pass? Was I going to the ceiling? Did I hit a really poor shot, so missed a pinch high or sailed something off the back wall? Or did I skip the ball? So I just made up the numbers here. But as you can see, when I was returning a drive serve to the left side, I killed or hit an offensive shot a couple of times, but I hit a poor shot 4 times. So that would stand out potentially as an area of weakness. I know it's a small data set, but this would be something you'd start to build and create as you watch match after match for yourself. You can see here lob left, I hit an offensive shot or a kill 4 times. I hit no poor shots. I only skipped once. I went to the ceiling twice. So this was probably a serve that I was quite confident in returning. And then lob right, you can see more poor shots, more skips, so probably a little bit weaker. But a really simple table, but it shows you pretty quickly just how effective you're being with your return to serve. And this is the same thing you could do for your opponent. So instead of watching myself, I'd be watching my opponent and saying, okay, when they're getting a drive to the left, or, again, I talked about you could put a drive Z, a lob Z to the right. What's happening? Are they offensive? Are they killing it? Are they going to the ceiling? So putting it in Notepad first is easy, just with some tick marks, and then bring it over to an Excel spreadsheet after the fact is a great way to save the data, keep a bit of a database, if you will. You can, save it by opponent, what have you, and then look back on it and just keep creating and building up those numbers. So you're going to get a more accurate, higher resolution look as time goes on. This one here is a little bit more difficult to track. We're going to look at what happens during setups. So return to serve is easy because you're always going to be in the back in the return to serve area, and you're always going to be returning a serve. You know it's going to be happening. Versus setups, they're going to be fluid. They're going to be all over the court, so you got to be a little bit more aware of what's happening and be pausing regularly. But you can do this for either yourself again. And to start with, you can say I have not quite a bird's eye view of the court, but if you had a diagram that was the entire court from exactly looking overhead would be perfect, because I do have the first few or back few feet cut off here. But what I've done is, as an example, I would have studied a match and paused every time that I got a setup. And then I would make note of what the outcome was, what my shot was from that setup. So if it was a skip or a poor shot, I would mark an X and where I was standing on the court. So I know I was standing here, here, and here when I skipped or hit a poor shot. And then if I hit a good shot, a kill shot, represented by the smiley face, because they make me very happy, I would put the smiley face in that position. So I killed the ball here, 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 here. So it's a really quick, easy visualization of, I'm probably weak from this part of the court, that middle left side, a lot strong on the right, and only one good shot from here, not a lot else to really see, but I was probably pretty darn good from the front left. And this is something that you could do for your opponents as well, but you have to make sure that every time there's a setup, you're pausing the video, stopping, being aware of what you're looking for, and then tracking the outcome, but making a note of where on the court they were hitting the shot from or missing it from. I think the best way would be to break the court down into 6 sections. So again, the court's cut off here, but split it right down the middle, left side, right side, and then a front third, middle third, back third. And you can have this visual diagram of the court, and then there is a way you can bring it into Excel and make the same table we looked at for serve. So you have the position on the court noted, and then the outcome of the shot. That was a little bit messier. It's not quite as clean as the return to serve table, so I thought this was a much nicer way to look at the data for just a really quick reference point that paints a very accurate picture of what is going on. So somebody could talk for hours and hours about all the other things that you can film. I focus on return to serves and setups because I think they paint a really accurate picture, and just doing that and doing it properly is going to give you a really good idea of where some weaknesses are in your game or opponent's game. And they're probably the easiest ones to analyze and continue to track over time. But some other examples of things that you can look at would be something like your racket prep. So you're watching every rally. Once I've hit the ball, when I get back to a good center court position, is my racket always prepped or is it down on my hips? You can look at tendencies for yourself and your opponent. Am I hitting the exact same shot in particular situations or scenarios? Contact point, realize, oh wow, I'm hitting the ball a lot higher most of the time than I thought I was. I really have time to let it drop. You can look at strategy. So, hey, I know where this opponent's weak, so here's what I want to do. Look back, did I do that? Or what are opponents doing against me? Fitness, can I see that my opponent's getting tired or his legs starting to give out? Is there um, some signs that he's not able to last for a long, really match or into a tiebreaker? Is he really gasping for air when he comes out during timeouts? Mental strength, so you can see an opponent's or yourself's body language. Are you exuding confidence and showing that you're in there to win and grind for every point, or do you look really defeated after you've lost a few points in a row? And it's really important to monitor that and see what you're doing, because you're not always aware until you see it on video. Even approach to the ball. So I know for myself, there's a lot of times where I can think back to a match and say, man, I didn't have a lot of time to get turned around, get my feet where they needed to be, get my racket prepped. And I felt like I was rushed and jammed. But then I watched the video and realized, man, I had all the time in the world. So is it because I had improper footwork and racket prep and technique that things felt far too rushed for me? Probably. So you start to realize how much time you have on setups and different situations around the court. I'm sure there's tons of other points that other more qualified coaches than me or other athletes can add to this list. So I certainly can't go through all of them and won't touch on all of them. That's why I feel that return to serve and setups are the most important, easiest thing to track. But absolutely, if you come up with other things yourself that you want to look at, then go for it.
And lastly, we come to pro matches. So I touched on it a bit earlier, but if you look on YouTube, Facebook, I'm not as familiar, but probably even Instagram, you can find a ton of different pro matches and footage on there that you can watch. Um, YouTube, I think, is best because you do have an option to slow down the video to like a half speed or even an 8, maybe even a 16th speed. So when you can do that, you could really take a close look at footwork and swing and things that are happening a little bit too quickly to get a good handle on in real time, especially over video. But the best thing to do is choose one thing to watch for each time you're viewing a match or viewing a game. So you can't go into the video with your notepad and say, I'm going to track return to serves and where the pros are killing balls from and their footwork and, you know, 3 or 4 other things. You're just not going to be able to focus on it and do it properly. So choose one thing. So for instance, I have a list here of a few, and of course there's much more than this, but just to give you a rough idea. So something like serving strategy. So you can look at a player and say what serves are they choosing to hit on their first serve, what are they hitting on their second serve, is there a reason why they're hitting it there? And we looked at some of the charting you can do for return to serve. So if you'd like, you can do it for the pro players and say, oh, well, there's a reason that he's hitting a kiss lob to the left side because his opponent is hitting poor shots or skipping it a lot of the time. So you can start to realize that there's patterns and thought process behind everything that they're doing. Another really surprising one, I think, is going to be some of the angles that their shots have and some of the heights on their shots. And you start to realize that the second bounce of a lot of their shots is ending up in the back court, and they're always getting their opponents deep, and they're always aiming to get them out of center court. Or when they're hitting splats and pinches, look at where the angle is and how they have to force their opponent to really move forward. And rarely they just hit the ball right back to each other. These are the best players in the world, so their control and their angles are going to be world class. So it's really interesting to make note of the angles and where the ball's ending up. You can see here I posted this picture of This is a slow motion cane clip, about just 2 minutes, 34 seconds, so it's really brief to watch, but this one is absolutely fantastic for looking at some swing mechanics of the best player to ever play the game. So nobody does it better than him. See the height he's contacting the ball, how he steps into the ball, his racket prep, his swing, his follow through, and it's a really clear HD slow motion video, and I can't recommend this one enough. But again, you could watch games to more so pick apart some strategy and some different things. So I think it gives people a new appreciation and respect for the game too, and just how good the pros are. But absolutely something to do if you don't have footage of yourself or some opponents, then do this. And it's going to give you a really good, clear picture in your head of what you can start to do or try to implement into your game when you get back to the court.
And as always, a brief recap of what we've talked about today. So reviewing film is the best way to maximize your time spent on the court, especially when it comes to practice sessions. You can review things either in real time or look back and identify what you want to improve on next time you're on the court. It's going to help you identify some patterns, which is going to assist you in identifying some weaknesses and some strengths within your game. And the same goes for identifying the strengths and weaknesses in your opponent's game. And it really is the only way to get an accurate idea as to what's happening on the court. Everybody has a picture in their head as to what they look like and what's going on, but until they see it on a screen, they really don't get a clear-cut picture of what is going on whenever they're playing games or in a practice session. And really study the pros carefully. When you're going to do this, though, only choose one element of the game that you're going to watch for, whether that is some strategy, some footwork, shot selection, shot angles, and heights. And that way you're going to be able to get as much as you possibly can out of that activity. And you're going to start to slowly build up a series of notes that you can use to reflect on and begin to implement into your own game. And it is very different than watching a match for pure entertainment and just kind of zoning out for it. It's very active. It can be tough to do for hours on end. I'm not saying you won't enjoy the process, but it is very different, and just be aware of that when you are starting to get into this a little bit. That's all I have for today, though. My name is Mitch Braley on behalf of Racquetball Canada. Thanks so much for checking in. Take care, and until next time, stay safe.